For just a short devotional tonight, we've been studying in our Sunday school lessons the story of creation. And last week we were in Genesis 1, and I was kind of in awe. I know I had read it a million times, but as you read down through Genesis 1, how many times it said, God said. God said. And as we went down through that, even through the first days of creation, it says, and God said, let there be light. And God said, let there be expanse in the midst of the waters. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered. And God said, let the earth sprout vegetation. And we could go on. And God said, that let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens. And God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures. And God said, let us make man in our image. And then he always said, and it was good. And that to me is a challenge. And as we were sharing today, everything we see in creation was made for God's glory. And even us as individuals, what a challenge that is for us to continue to remember, no matter what is going on in this world, we were made for God's glory. And the creation really doesn't change. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world around us. It doesn't change. It still shows God's glory. And that's my prayer for us as individuals. And one of the things that we're hoping as we go through these weekend series of meetings, that we will be able to see even in a greater level what it means to honor and glorify God in the way we live and the way we worship. Was Matt Olmsted's this morning, and Brother Brian is coming tonight and going to share with us. And so I'm going to turn our time over to him, and you can close however you see fit. So Brian,
I might start here and then move up there. That's interesting that you talked about God and His glory, and I'll just tell you a little bit about me first before we look at the topic. And one of the things I would say is, in addition to being a preacher, I have the list of things that I've done to feed my family it's a long list. I don't know if that means I have some form of ADHD and I don't stick with anything very long, or what that's exactly entitled, but it's a varied list of things. But one of the things that I have done for the last 9 years and really enjoy is beekeeping. And I not only sell honey, but I sell bees in the spring. So I try to start new hives all summer long, and then take bees out of my existing hives to help those new queens get going. And then I try to get those small hives to survive the winter. And if they can survive the winter, then in the spring I sell those to other beekeepers who maybe their bees didn't survive the winter, or maybe they're just getting started in beekeeping. So I'll sell them this starter hive called a nucleus hive. And so I've been doing that for about 9 years, and I just thoroughly enjoy it. And I see the wonder of God in the beehive over and over and over again. In the book of Daniel, it talks about Belteshazzar. Daniel's Babylonian name was Belshazzar, but Nebuchadnezzar had a son whose name was Belteshazzar. There's a T in there. When Belteshazzar took over in his dad's absence then, it wasn't very long before he had a party. And at his drinking party, he gave an order to go get the holy vessels that were brought from the Holy Land, the gold and the silver goblets and things that had been made for the worship of God in the temple. And he said, bring those out. And so they're having their drinking party. And it says that they praised the gods of gold and of silver and of wood and of stone. Now his dad had learned some amazing things about God, had learned in some very interesting ways. But here these guys are praising I wrote a little song about that one time, and I said, they gave praise to the walls and to the floor. That's how high their praise was. It's like stone and wood. When there's so much that you can praise God for. I'd like 3 volunteers. Just come right up. 3. Paul. There, I got started now. 2 more. Come. Paul, you're just going to take your fingers and you're going to make a circle, and we're going to call that, make it so they can see the circle instead of you. We're going to call that 5 millimeters. So I need you to make one that's 6 millimeters. So in relation to his, yours will be a little bit bigger. And you need one that's about 8 or 9 millimeters. Okay. These are the size of 3 cells that are in a beehive. Paul has a worker cell that's 5 to 5.5 centimeters in diameter. And what's your name? AJ. AJ has a drone cell that is about 6 to 6.5 centimeters. And you have a queen cell that's going to be about 8 centimeters. Okay, now we have a queen bee, and queen bee is laying eggs in the hive. When she comes to a cell and is ready to lay an egg in that cell, the first thing she's going to do is she's going to take, now I can't tell you whether she'll use her antenna or whether she'll use her front forelegs, but she's going to use something and she's going to measure this cell. And based on what she found, or what she found here, or what she found here, she's going to change her behavior. Now this, how many of you had raised chickens before? Come on, there's more than that. Okay. What's the difference? If I don't have a rooster in with the chickens, can I hatch any chicks? No. The eggs are unfertilized. It's an infertile egg. We can't hatch any chicks out of the eggs from our infertile chickens. A queen bee has gone on a mating flight when she was like within about a week of her hatching out. She goes on a mating flight, and she fills this storage tank, if you will, in her body with semen. And based on that one flight, or maybe she might go 2 days, but it's just one short period of time. Based on that, she can lay eggs for 3 to 5 years. And she can lay up to 500,000 eggs in her lifetime. But what's interesting is when she comes to this cell and she sees that that is a worker cell, she's going to lay an egg, and as she lays the egg, she will fertilize it from her spermatheca. But then she will come over to this cell, and she measures that, and she says that's a drone cell, and she will lay an unfertilized egg in there. Because an unfertilized chicken egg can't hatch anything, but an unfertilized honeybee egg will hatch a drone. A drone has, this is a trick statement, you know, what has no father but has a grandfather? And the answer is a drone bee, because a drone bee only has the genetics of the queen. A worker bee has 32 chromosomes, and a drone bee only has 16. So it's missing the whole half of the chromosomes. And this, I don't know if you're seeing God in any of this stuff, but it just, okay, now she comes over here, and there aren't a lot of these cells. They're only going to build these queen cups at certain times, like when the hive is crowded and they know we need to swarm and start a new hive, then that queen will leave, but before she leaves the hive with a bunch of workers, she'll lay some eggs in these queen cups. Now when she gets to this, she's going to lay the same fertilized egg that she did over here, but they tell us that when she lays an egg in a queen cup, it will be on average 13% larger than what that worker egg was. Because the health of the queen, the size of the queen, just everything, her strength, all is going to determine the future health of the hive. And so somehow God programs it that she comes to this and just, we got a little extra oomph here. This gets a little bonus. But think through the mechanics of laying a fertilized egg or laying an unfertilized egg. How do you do that? I mean, the chicken's either going to lay a fertile egg or an infertile egg, just depending on whether there was a rooster around. She's choosing by instinct, not by her thought. And anyway, you guys can sit down. I could go on for hours about the wonders of the beehive, but it is. Think about it. You can give glory to God for his just incredible creativity and ingenuity and just all of that, or you can praise chance. Just like you can praise the God of heaven, or you can praise the walls and the floor. I choose the wonder of praising the God of creation for just the incredible things that he's done. So there's having somewhere to go when we need help. That's a pretty good bonus too. But we were made to worship. If we are all we have, we know our own fallibility, and if that's all we have to worship, we're kind of miserable creatures. But fortunately, that's not the way it is. Finishing well. What's it mean at the end of the road? Paul said, I've fought the good fight, I've finished the race, I have kept the faith. And now there is in store for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. But in pondering some of that and thinking about retirement, where's retirement come from? Well, I can tell you where some of it comes from, because I'm 64. I'll be 65 before the end of the year. So it's that magic age at which you have to make decisions within 3 months before your 65th birthday or 3 months after. You have to declare yourself with Medicare, what you're going to do, and are you going to sign up for Part A and Part B and this and that and the other thing. So I've got a bunch of those thoughts in my head lately. But also, when I was about 34, I spent a couple years fishing in Bristol Bay, which is in Alaska. We had a set net site. And the difference between a drifter and a set netter is that a drifter is a boat that puts a net out behind the boat, and they drift along with the tide. And as the fish are swimming through the tide, they swim into their net. And a set net site is where you anchor your net in either it's along the edge of the water, but you've got it staked in on both ends, and so the moving water will carry the fish right into it. But we had a set net site. There was a lady staying at the same the cannery whose husband had a drifter, had a boat out in the bay, and he would come in and spend the night there, I think. I don't think she went on the boat. I think he came in. And anyway, when there was an opener, he'd be drifting out there, and she'd be set netting in the It was called a slough. A slough is a river that runs in when the tide's going in, and it runs back out when the tide's going back out again. So the water could be going either direction. So the second year we were there, she said, "It's time to sell my set-net site." I was like, "Oh, why is that?" She said, "I've been doing this for 15 years or 16 years. She said, when I was 45 and they would announce there's an opener tomorrow morning, I would go down to my boat, a skiff it was called. I'd go down to the skiff and I'd check the fuel and I'd check the nets and I'd check everything, and everything was good. And I went up and I went to bed, set the alarm clock, and got up and fished the next day." She said, "Now I can't do that. Now if they say there's an opener tomorrow morning, I go down to the skiff and I get everything ready just like I always did. And then I go up and I lay down and I might fall asleep, but then I wake up and I think, did I do this? And did I do this? And did I do this?" And she said, it's just different, and it isn't fun anymore, and I'm ready to lay it down. And when you're 34 and you hear someone say that, you don't necessarily relate to what they're talking about. But now at 60, I can relate better to what they're talking about. And we can't, I don't know anybody that can say what Caleb did in the scriptures. He said, "I am as strong at 80 as I was at 40. I've never met anyone like that, have you? I think there was supernatural preservation involved in Caleb's case there. Because stress is different as we get older. My wife is finding that watching a bunch of grandkids doesn't feel the same at 63. Is that okay to say you're 63? That's wrong. What's that? That's wrong. Oh, you caught me. She's 64. I did say it wrong. Her birthday's in July, so she's... Don't say my weight. Okay. I always say I was born in the 50s and she was born in the 60s, so she's just, a ways behind there. But what's it look like for the believer? Do we do different things as we get older? But what's retirement mean? Come here a second, Tree. In December, I reached this sort of magical age of retirement of 65. So I guess that means I need to retire from being your husband.
Oh, yeah? What are you saying?
Well, I'm not going to divorce you. That'd be like quitting a job. Well, I'm not going to quit. It's not time to quit a job. It's just time to retire. Retire is this idea of kind of being finished with something. You've completed, and it's time to. So I guess I don't know what it looks like. I've never been there before, but it's time for me to retire from. I don't have to keep going, do I? It's kind of. Yeah. You don't look like you're understanding me very well. How many of you would say, that's preposterous? Well, the reason is because being a husband is not a vocation. Being a husband is not a task to be completed. Being a husband is a relationship. And we took vows that say, until death do us part. Along those lines, well, let's look at a couple passages of Scripture. First, we'll look at what not to do, okay? What not to do is in Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12, beginning in verse 13. Then one from the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or an arbiter between you?" And he said to them, "Take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses." Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, "The ground of a certain man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, 'What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops?' So he said, 'I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things be which you have provided?'" I'm going to read that again and listen to it with a slightly different emphasis. Then he thought within himself, saying, "What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops?" So he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry." Now we can read that and say, well, okay, is it wrong to store up in times of plenty? I don't think so. Because in Proverbs, go to the ant, you sluggard, and watch him. And the ant's going to store up when it's time to store up. And that's given as an example of what we should do. But this guy was looking at his retirement account and wanting to eat, drink, and be merry. He wasn't wanting to trust the Lord for next year's crop. He wasn't wanting to bless anybody else with what God had given him. It just appears that he wanted, this is all for me. This is mine. Very different from a stewardship that says, God owns all of this stuff. And I'm not sure why he gave me this much this year. Let's try to figure it out. Lord, what do you want me to do with this? One of the problems with a retirement account is if I can put enough in that account that I don't need to trust God. It's like, where's your food going to come from? That's going to come from my account. Well, where's your housing going to come from? It's going to come from that account. How are you going to pay the fuel bill? Going to take it out of the account. And we get enough in the account that we don't need to trust God anymore. We'd do better to give away 3/4 of it and get to a point where we say, I'm not quite sure how we're going to make it. God, we're going to rely on you because we can't rely on us. I'm not saying a society shouldn't help one another. I'm not saying that I shouldn't draw Social Security. That's another thing at my age. You got to figure out, okay, now when do you start drawing that? The longer you wait, the more you draw when you draw it, and you draw it too soon, and then they make you pay it back if you earn some money, and then it just... That money was... This is how I view Social Security. I view it as a combination of a savings account and an insurance policy. And the savings account part is that they took money out of my paycheck every week, every year, however I paid in, whether I was self-employed or whatever. But each year they took some and they put it toward my Social Security account. So I have this ledger that's building value. But the insurance part of it is if I'm injured when I'm young and I've been paying in and participating with that, then it can pay me back a lot more than I ever put into it because it was there. It's a social program, meaning society is providing for the people in the society. And is that good? Is that bad? I don't think it's either one. It does place us in an odd position as a church when there aren't really any hungry people in our county if they go to the programs that are there and are ready to feed them. I mean, there are, I'll be careful how I say that, but there are so many social programs that the work that in the book of Acts was being done by the church is now being largely done by the government. And I don't have time to go into all that, what parts of that are good and what's bad and what's whatever. But sometimes it's hard to know what our task is as the church because there's so much crossover and so much different things. But at any rate, let's go to John chapter 15. John chapter 15. Jesus is talking. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes so that it may bear more fruit. You are already pruned because of the word which I have spoken to you. I used prune there just because where it said clean, you were already clean. It's the same word that was just used as prune, the line before that. So he's talking this process of cutting away that which is unproductive. He's saying that's being done in your lives. The word that I spoke to you did that. Abide in me and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered. And they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. So I apologize that my vine is starting to go dormant. So that's the reason we've got some. How much fruit do you think we'll get off this branch? Not going to get any anymore, are we? Because I just cut it off of the vine. We could say, well, it wasn't bearing fruit anyway, so we'll throw it away. This one might bear more fruit if I just there. Now that one can bear more fruit. If I'm not in Jesus, I'm going to bear as much fruit as that branch down there on the ground. So the question is, when do I retire from serving Jesus? It's just like the husband thing. I can't retire from being a husband. I don't want to retire from being a husband. But the concept of retiring from being a husband doesn't even make sense. Because the context is a relationship, not a task. And living with Jesus and serving Jesus, and Jesus living in us, and being connected to Him, the nourishment is coming up from that plant. And Jesus is saying, I'm the vine. And from me, you're going to get what you need to bear fruit. And if you're not going to bear fruit, I say, well, listen, I worked hard in the kingdom and I bore fruit when I was younger. And God knows that I'm retirement age now, so I don't have to bear fruit anymore. I did that. I served my time, I bore my fruit, and now I'm retired. I didn't quit, I just completed the task and I retired. So find that in John 15 for me. You're not going to find it there. Because it isn't there. Because this relationship with Jesus is just that. It's a relationship. And it's not based on a task. Now, will He give me tasks to do? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's not a task. Being a Christian, being a follower of Jesus, isn't a task that I can complete. And that really is the gist of what I have to share with us tonight. So in the same way that I'm not going to retire from being a husband, I'm not going to retire. Will it look different? I think it will. In 1 John, John is saying, I write to you children. And then he says, I write to you fathers. And then he says, I write to you young men. And he's kind of got these three age. And he may be referring to spiritual age rather than physical age. But I think we can sort of, when he says, I write to you young men because you are strong and you have overcome the evil one. And he says, I write to you fathers because you have known him who is from the beginning. Well, I see some difference there. I see the fathers, I see the older people in the congregation. Part of what they have is they're abiding in Jesus. They know him who was from the beginning. Talking relationship there. And the young men, I think he's challenging them. Guys, get out there and win some battles for Jesus. You're strong, and you can take on this stuff. Not in your own strength. If you're not connected to the vine, nothing will come of it. So do I expect things to change as we get older? I do. I have for years preached with maybe 3 little lines, couple of verses on a piece of paper. That's what I come here with. I mean, I can actually have 2. There's my notes for tonight. And that's just the way I do. But all of a sudden, and I've done that for years. But all of a sudden, it's different. And my brain is playing tricks on me, and things that I knew where I wanted to find them, I suddenly can't remember where to go and find them. Boy, bummer, I lost that address. It's just like a name. I know most of you by sight, but coming up with the names is a little different. Well, as those things change, I don't think I should be staying in the pulpit until it becomes an awkward situation every Sunday, because I just can't recollect what I used to. Because there's young men that need to be where I am. My dad served as overseer in New York Conference until he was 80, I can't remember, it was 87 or 88. And I saw two sides to that. And the two sides that I saw to that were, that's an incredible example to just be there and continue serving. And the other side I saw to it is, where are the young men, not the 30-year-olds, where are the 50 and 60-year-olds who should be serving in those capacities? And we've got an 87-year-old who's having trouble remembering a lot of things, still serving because there's no one there to, again, definitely see two sides of it. And I don't want to say, "Oop, I'm 65, I'm done with everything, and you guys take it over." No. But I think it will look different as we age. We aren't going to be done. We aren't going to be done until Jesus calls us home. And then we can, well, I don't know if we stop bearing fruit or if fruit just looks different at that point. There's so much of that side of it that we don't have a clue. But we know that that's when we will have fulfilled that which God put us here for and it called us here on earth. Lord, as each of us age, your word says that outwardly we are wasting away, and inwardly we are being renewed day by day. Thank you for that, Jesus. Thank you for that, and just continue to bear fruit through each one who's sitting here tonight. Fruit for your kingdom. Thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
I want to thank Brian for sharing that with us tonight. And I had to think of, I was doing a sermon here a couple weeks ago, and I read it. I can't think of the guy's name right now, but when he preached, they called him Sweet, and whatever his name was, because when he spoke, it was like sweet words to the ears. And that's what I was thinking about when Brian was sharing tonight. He has a mannerism about him that's just sweet to listen to. So I thank you, Brian and Cherie, for coming. And if you want to go to the back, you can greet people as they walk out. And tomorrow night, Nate Olmstead and I believe Hassan is going to be here from Utica to talk about biblical mission. And then Titus will be preaching, my dad will be preaching Tuesday night on biblically living in this world in the time we are in. And so I hope that each one of you can come, invite some friends to come along with you, and we'll hopefully see each other the next two evenings. So